Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the National Guard products number 780SA. This is a clear anodized aluminum Slimline automatic door bottom with a silicone insert. I have one removed here from the packaging. Here we go. So this is an automatic door bottom, and we're going to talk a lot about automatic door bottoms and what they are. I'm going to mention probably multiple times that they're a very elegant way to seal the bottom of the door. Let's do a visual first. First of all, this is what they call a slimline, and that's because it's petite. It's not very tall. It's not very thick. Okay. The 780 is representative of this profile. Now the S in the part number stands for silicone, and that's important to know because this being silicone is also available in a V for vinyl. So you could do a 780 V. The difference being vinyl is less expensive. Vinyl is also not nearly as robust or capable of handling exposure to ultraviolet, capable of handling extreme temperatures. Silicone is a better choice all the time, except in the instance perhaps where you might have 50 of these to do and you're a contractor and the specification might be loose or it specifies vinyl. It's less expensive, and that would be the only reason, in my opinion, where you would use vinyl, because of the cost. So 780 is the door bottom. The S or the V is next. That's the insert. The A is the reference to the finish. Clear anodized aluminum is what this is. Also, DKB. If you made a 780S or a 780V DKB, you'd get the aluminum housing in a dark bronze finish. And dark bronze finish is naturally quite typical as well. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm going to say several times how elegant of a solution automatic door bottoms are. Let's get into what these are, why they're used, how they're used, etc. First of all, there is a description below this video. Slimline automatic door bottom with a silicone insert. Maximum drop 1/2 inch. That's very important to understand. This petite model can only drop 1/2 inch. You'll want to be sure that you're not asking it to do a greater job than otherwise. Generally, this would be flushed off to the bottom of the door, which we'll talk more about installation. So if the distance from the bottom of the door to where you want to seal, the top of your sill or your threshold, if it's greater than 1/2 inch, you'll either need to select a different model, possibly cheat this down a little bit, which is not at all recommended. So navigating which way to proceed in that event might be your next step. But if so far so good, let's continue. Clear anodized aluminum with a gray silicone. That's going to be the color of this silicone. On the DKB, I would expect the silicone to be black. Although I've seen dark bronze from National Guard silicone, dark bronze models from National Guard that have silicone inserts is gray as well. So if you want to be absolutely sure of what the finish is prior to ordering it, reach out to us. We'll address that first. Smoke and draft control, UL listed category H, UL10B, UL10C, fire rated up to 90 minute, acoustically rated, air infiltration tested, ANSI BHMA certified, which is the governing body of the door hardware industry. All of that conspires to mean this is going to work great in applications that require that, such as hotels. This is a nice little model that is not going to take a lot of room up, okay, on the bottom of the door. Those doors are they're always smoke and draft control, especially new construction. They're always fire rated, especially new construction. The fact that they're air infiltration tested, the fact that they are acoustically, that they are constructed and engineered to attenuate the transfer of acoustic energy from one side of the door to the other, all of that conspires again to make it perfect for a hotel application, for a residential application as well. Speaking of residential applications, this item unbelievably and almost uniquely, is available from 2-foot all the way to 8-foot widths. Now, where in the world would you use a single 8-foot length of this? Not many instances that I can point to, but 5-foot wide, yeah, I see 5-foot wide single doors relatively often. Doors that are going to be that large are generally going to be quite custom, where you're dealing with something so wide. But the point of the matter is, if you've got an application where your door is as wide as 8 foot, the Slimline 780 can be manufactured to that length, and indeed, we have it listed in the site from 2-foot to 8-foot length. So we're going to talk more about the length to order this material shortly. Now, the 780 is only available with silicone or vinyl. There's a reference down below here, and there won't be probably by the time that you see this video, that they recommend nylon brush for carpet applications, or maybe I'll leave it there. Nylon bristle would be appropriate for an installation by which you have a very irregular floor surface. A pitted concrete sill, maybe a fluted top threshold, carpeting. The silicone fins, the fins that are featured on this piece of silicone, will sure give you an ability to tailor a little bit, but not really so much, not to get the countless bristle fingers into all of the nooks and crannies of an irregular surface. So keep that in mind. This would be better for something a bit smoother, is the bottom line. On this model, end caps are furnished as standard items. I'm going to show that to you right now. Your package is going to have 3 end caps in it. Why 3? You only have 2 ends. Here's why. You're going to have 2 that have a square hole in it. They're the same, except that they're just different hands. And then you're going to have 1 without. They'll all have a couple of holes in it, and that's going to be appropriate for attaching the end cap to the door. Now, why do you have 2 that are the opposite hand? Well, this item can be attached to the door as a left hand, or it can be attached to the door as a right hand. The end cap is necessarily going to change. If you're going to put it on this side, you're in great shape. Okay? You get the concept that if you're going to put this on the other side of the door, you would need the other end cap for this. So that's why you're going to have 2 different end caps with the square holes, because you've got this square feature, which we'll discuss in a moment, on only one side. The other side is blank. That's where you will use the blank end cap. And these end caps are certainly nothing other than white coat galvanized pieces of steel. The little holes that are there are for just simply brad nailing the end cap right to the face of the door. So, assuming that you have a wood door, you're in good shape. You have a steel door, you're going to need to go to plan B on that. You might need to drill those holes out, get a couple of number 4 panhead sheet metal screws, things of that nature. That might be a problem. You might want flat head, or at least flat undercut head. You'll need to consider where the head of the screw might fall in relationship to the face of the doorstop. We'll talk more about the installation in a moment. We'll work half mortised on swing or sliding doors. Now here's where that 96-inch comes into play. This is a quite unique item, and in the sentence I just said, we'll work half mortised on swing or sliding doors. Let's discuss that right now. Okay, now half mortise. Let's dissect this part number that we're working on here. This unit is generally surface mounted. You're going to take this and you're going to slap it on the face of the door, obviously on the push side, maybe not obviously, but on the push side. The side of the door that's locked, the push side, is where this gets installed. You could also take this. So to finish that thought off, the door is here. This is going to literally be surface mounted and be projecting off the face of the door. Now, you can, of course, not of course, but the mortise, the reference to mortise means you could take this, lay your door down flat, take a router, and route the bottom of the door to the dimensions, width, and thickness of the door bottom, and surface mount it, mortise it flush to the face of the door. And that's a real elegant way to install a unit like this. And there are times, quite frankly, when it becomes required that you install it that way, which we'll touch on in a moment. Surface mount, most common. The plunger is going to make contact with, of course, the stop. We'll dissect that in a moment. Mortise means that it will make contact with the rabbet in the frame. Now, it would be best at this point to initiate a discussion on how these function. Then we're going to go back and talk about surface mount versus mortise, because part of the understanding of how these work is part and parcel. So you'll study the fact that this end of the door bottom has this square item projecting out of the edge. And if you'll notice, please, this end does not have that. Simply put, this is a plunger, a bolt. This bolt is connected to a spring. That spring is connected to the drop bar mechanism, which is that H-shaped item with the insert material in it. The fundamental principle of an automatic door bottom is that when the door closes, the bottom drops seals the door. That's elegant. It does so automatically every time you close the door. And every time you open the door, it snaps back up into its housing and it stays there until you push the door closed again. That action is accomplished by the depressing of this plunger or this bolt. When I push it in, you can see the bottom drops. This has such a low closing force that I'm able to easily push it with a finger. The amount of projection of this is directly related to the drop on most units. This unit does not allow you to alter the amount of drop that's accomplished as you would on a standard unit. This model, you have to actually grab that plastic block and pull it out. It's spring-loaded. Don't pull it out too far. You pull it out and you can rotate it. And as you turn it clockwise, it draws back further into the housing. Turn it a couple more times. Now it's sticking out less than it was. If I kept going, I could make that basically flush. The amount of projection is related to the amount of drop. I take it out and I turn it counterclockwise. I'll draw it out, allowing for greater drop. The maximum drop is 1/2 of an inch. When this is installed on the push side of the door, and the door is pushed closed, and the next rule is this is always installed on the hinge side of the door, and this without the plunger is always installed on the lock side of the door. When the door is pushed closed, this will make contact, depending on the installation, with the frame, either on the stop or in the rabbet. If it's surface mounted, it will touch the stop. It will have nowhere to go but in, and as it goes in, the bottom drops. The amount of projection is related to the amount of drop. Now, the difference on surface mounting or mortising it flush changes the area of the frame that this makes contact with. It doesn't change the function, but changes where this, again, touches. So when you have this installed on the door, and we're going to go over the installation instructions, and it depresses in, it drops the bottom down. When you mortise it, and the next reference is swing or sliding doors, if it is a sliding door, let's say a pocket door, you will very likely need to mortise it. So you would take that door and you're going to mortise it with a plunge router or whatever, this height, this thickness, and get that right on the face of the door with that plunger sticking towards the end where the jam when the door closes. And that action will allow the bottom to drop. Now, most door bottoms do not drop down like this one does, you may have noticed, uniformly. Simply put, most don't drop uniformly, almost all of them. But if you have a sliding door, you have to have a uniform drop, because if you drop down one edge and then it knifes down, that would create a situation that when you're closing the door and the plunger starts to make contact, you're still moving the door and it's already beginning to drop down. You don't want any movement on the door while there's contact of the door bottom on the floor. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. When you mortise the bottom of the door, and by the way, no fire-rated doors would you mortise in the field for this. That preparation would violate the fire rating of the door. Not that you can't use this on fire-rated doors, because you can. You just have to be sure that the door has been manufactured accordingly to account for this preparation that would be done by a licensed shop, manufacturer, someone who has the authority to create, manufacture, or remanufacture a door to the required dimensional requirements of this templating. When you install this on a swinging door, you would use the end caps. If you were to install it on a sliding door, I don't really see an elegant way to use the end caps, because you don't have anywhere to really install the end cap, really without compromising the installation. It would look more like this naturally. Whoop. You do want to try to dress that off if you can, but the problem is getting it attached to the door. Okay, so if you're doing a swinging sort of application, a sliding application, take into account that we don't have a factory option for an end cap on a sliding door, but do take into account the desire on our part for you to reach out to us and say, it's a sliding door, what can I do to dress the ends off? And we'll reach out to the manufacturer at that point. So mortising the door is going to place the unit so that the bar, if it's a swinging door, makes contact with the rabbet. If it's a sliding door, it's just going to touch the jamb. The fact that it is a sliding door is going to require that the unit behave in such a way that it drops uniformly. Now we've got a conversation about how swinging and sliding, mortise or surface mounted, will affect the door operation. We can continue on. One very important thing to know about this unit is that it has been cycle tested and that is admittedly a closer, an automatic door bottom that is 5 times greater than grade 1. Grade 1 being the heaviest classification for 1 million cycles. This is 5 million. This is quite a robust, tiny, compact unit. Okay, and for the cost, it's going to be pretty hard to beat. Now, what makes these elegant? Not only are they automatic where they're always going to close, but that's handy because while it's not really appropriate on a model that drops uniformly, most automatic door bottoms can contour themselves to a sill that's not level, even though this one's really not meant to do that at all because it drops uniformly. They're elegant, this model and others, is because there's nothing dragging across the floor. There's nothing to hit an obstacle put behind the door like a rug or a shoe. Every time the door opens, it's up, tucked, and out of the way. You've got a polished floor, whether it be wood or some sort of stone treatment. Over years, you're going to have a wear mark. Not with this. If you have a rug on the inside, if there's a residential application attached garage, open the door, going to walk in, snow on your shoes, the rug is there, your kids leave a shoe there, not a problem, because this is out of the way, whereas a traditional door sweep would not be able to handle that operation at all. Speaking of elegant, for a sliding sort of door, how much better can it be to have a sliding door with an automatic door bottom? I've seen these installed, sliding doors, in hotel applications. Well, in most sliding door applications, there's a sizable gap all the way around. It's a bathroom, and it's intended that there be some obvious visual privacy, but acoustic privacy as well. And you can purchase weather stripping to gasket the head and both jambs of a sliding door in this model allows you to seal the bottom of it as well. So that's quite an elegant way to go about compensating for a sliding or a pocket door application in a commercial type setting. Moving on to the installation. There's a link below this video to that document, and let's go over it now. I won't not in too great detail, just tips and tricks. Before we do that, let's confirm the dimensional properties. The image below this video states that this is 1 3/8 tall. That is the case. 9/16 body thickness. Again, that is the case. Now, the link to the installation instructions. For single doors, cut the bottom of the, for single doors, cut the door bottom on the end without the adjustment block. Never cut this side. Always cut this side. 1/8 of an inch shorter than the distance between the stops on the frame. This is obviously speaking about a swinging door installation. So a swinging door installation, the door is closed. You measure the distance between the stops because that's the space in which this is going to occupy. Take that dimension, deduct 1/8 of an inch, that's your order size. Or that's what you're going to cut it to in the field. I suggest that you order it from the factory to the net size that you need because it will save you the time and effort of cutting the unit down in the field. It will relieve of you the exposure to risk of damaging the item if you're cutting it. Not that it's going to damage, but that drop bar is loose. I personally would not want to. That drop bar is loose. I personally would not want to cut that at all. I just wouldn't want to do it. Now you certainly can, and the installation instructions indicate that to be the case. But there are instances when you cannot trim it in the field, and that instance is when your unit is smaller than 36 inch. There's no guarantee that the factory is allowing any sort of field trimming if your door is, say, 34 inch, 2'10", 2'8", whatever the case is. 36 inch and longer can be trimmed in the field up to 4 inch. You wouldn't know this, but there's a small amount of evidence right here on the lock side. This little hole here, it's only on one side. Then you've got these 3 holes, that's for installation. You've got another pinhole here. You can see it better here. Well, the case is, this is the lock side, this is the lock side. You can trim up to 4 inch. This is the evidence of the mechanical connection of the inner workings of this. When you've got a unit smaller than 3 foot, that connection to the mechanical inner workings can be quite close to the edge. And you can probably take off a tiny bit, 1/8, but that's pretty tough to cut, 1/8 of an inch. So, if your doors are 3 foot and bigger, you've got 4 inch you can trim. If your door is smaller, order at the net size. I feel that you should order at the net size regardless. Why bother with cutting it down? The fact is, National Guard is going to make these, cut the components from long extrusions, 14 feet in length. They really don't care if it's 36 inch or 35 and 1/8. It doesn't matter at all. They're cutting it anyway. They're not sitting there pre-manufactured. They're made to order. Now, to give you an example of how you're going to get to an order size, in a swinging door, let's just take the example of a hollow metal door. 3 foot hollow metal door. The inside frame dimension is 36 inch. Let's say your door is 35 3/4. The actual door size doesn't really matter at all. Although it's good to know, but because it can help you determine the net size. What's most important, again, is that dimension between the stops. A 3 foot metal door is 36 inch, and a standard hollow metal frame will have 5/8 stops. So 36 inch less 5/8 less 5/8, that's 1 1/4. So now you're at 34 3/4 distance between the stops. Deduct 1/8 of an inch, you're at 34 5/8. That's your net size. If you ordered it that size, you'll have to do no cutting whatsoever, and all you'll really have to do is get it applied to the door, mark your holes, pre-drill them, attach, turn your adjusting nut in, and then test. If you don't order it the size that you need, then you'll be cutting it down. Let's talk about it. Trimming this model you will do when it's in this sort of condition. You will just trim it very carefully. You're going to deal with a couple of instances of aluminum that's here. and your silicone. You might want to pull that out a little bit or just cut through it, whatever is your preference. Very carefully and with a hacksaw, do it by hand would be my suggestion. You know, I like to, when I cut these, I like to pinch it a little bit so that I don't have that moving as much. Just give a little bit of crimp to it, just with my fingers to try to eliminate any movement. Once you've got it cut to size, step 2, with the door in the closed position, on the push side of the door with the adjustment block towards the hinge side, with this towards the hinge side, align the bottom of the case flush with the bottom of the door, allow a 1/16 of an inch between between the jamb and the end of the unit, center it basically, 1/16 and a 1/16 is that 1/8 of an inch smaller, and then mark your holes. You're in good shape. Now, we talked about the net size. Well, if you have mortised the unit to the door in a swinging application, you don't measure between the stops. Now you're going to take the width of the door, and that's where that's important. Again, not a fire-rated door. So if your door is 35 and 13/16 and it's beveled, you might want to make it 35 and 3/4 because that bevel is going to be tipping towards you, and then you might file the end off a little bit delicately to compensate for the fact that your bevel 35 and 3/4 would be a bit heavy for the push side of the door. And in that sort of instance is what you're going to take into account. What's the door width? Measure the unit to accommodate that based on your best expectation, because it doesn't matter. Between the stops, you're mounting it now in the space where the door resides. If it's a sliding door, you're going to treat it the same way. You're probably going to operate based on the actual door width. There'd be no reason to really deviate from that at all. Step 2, align it to the bottom. Align the bottom to the bottom of the door. Drill your pilot holes. Install with the screws provided. Screws are provided. And don't over-tighten. If you over-tighten it, it's going to crush the, on a very small scale, crush the case and not allow smooth operation. On a wooden frame, install the strike plate to the jamb, and there is a small flathead screw that's included here, meaning this over time will create a divot in a wood frame, and you're going to strategically locate this right there on the frame. Adjust for proper door seal. Before you test the door, when the door is in the open position, take that adjusting block, pull it out, turn it clockwise, and draw it in. Carefully test the door operation, and I say carefully because when the seal drops, all you want it to do is make contact with the surface of the door, not an excessive amount of pressure pushing against the sill. There's no reason for that because it's not aiding your installation. If you've got excessive pressure, if this is pushing in too hard on the internal spring, and the spring is like a flat spring, and let's say that when it's compressed, when the block gets pushed in, it bellies, forces the bottom to drop. The action of how this has to work is that as soon as the door is opened or slid open, the pressure must be immediately begun to be removed from the block, the adjusting block, therefore allowing the item to start to snap up back in the housing. If you had undue pressure on that, you would get the door open a couple of inches and you're dragging the drop bar across the floor. That's going to damage and probably destroy the unit. So keep that in mind when I say test it carefully, a couple of rotations at a time. That's really all you need. I like to put a piece of paper down on the floor, drop over it, and just test how well I can tug the piece of paper out. And you'll make a determination at that point exactly how far in or out to have the adjusting seal. Which is all step 6. End caps with holes should be mounted to the door at the hinge and lock side. Install as illustrated, and there is an image that shows that there, which we did touch on earlier. So with a surface mount model, it's going to look just like this. And that little flange is going to tuck between the face of the door and the face of the stop. A couple little brad nails will be included, and that will trim off your installation. Okay. They're elegant. They're smart. They handle instances where door sweeps cannot work. Now, there's a downside, and as I've said in other videos when I've reviewed automatic door bottoms, if I've sold 10,000, and I have, maybe lots more, there's been one person who said, "Oh, I don't like that. I can hear that clank." And the truth of the matter is, you can. There is a sound involved in that H hitting the inner, the exterior housing of the unit. I personally do not take into account that one disadvantage, given the fact, when you compare it against all of the advantages, clearly outweighed. Given the fact that National Guard has other models that will absolutely significantly reduce the amount of clanking that you'll hear, because that inner housing will be lined with neoprene. When you get into heavier, larger, more robust units, the degree to which they try to attenuate, transfer of all energy, cold, sound, everything, gets better as well. So they've got multiple lines of defense in that door bottom, and that in effect helps reduce any sound that you hear from that. In conclusion, there's a link below this video to a document called, to the manufacturer's page, where you can pull up the full line National Guard product and review all things weather stripping related, not only all of their automatic door bottoms. And that link to the product brochure shows this and their immediate sister products related to it. But it will allow you to familiarize yourself with National Guard. Thresholds, door sweeps, perimeter gasketing, material made of aluminum, stainless steel, architectural bronze. Their name is quite synonymous with weather stripping, and if you make a living in the door installation industry, you must surely be already aware of them. But if you're not, familiarize yourself. You will probably sooner or later run across their name and already have a working knowledge of at least who they are, where they're located, and how to look at the catalog. If you have any questions on the National Guard product, 780SA, clear anodized aluminum Slimline automatic door bottom with a silicone insert, or any other National Guard products item, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.